On our 10th anniversary, my boyfriend secretly married my best friend, fulfilling her dying wish. But betrayed and heartbroken, I found solace in the arms of a powerful tycoon. Now, as I stand by my new husband's side, the man who crushed my heart watches me build a new life without him. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. 10 years together. Yet, my boyfriend hosted a grand wedding for my best friend who was battling cancer. Her dying wish had been to marry him, and Stephen Redmond blocked every line of communication to make sure I never found out. But what he didn't know was that my so-called best friend streamed the entire ceremony to me. I cried myself into unconsciousness that night. Stephen, however, spent the night on an island, by her side. When my heart condition worsened one day, he left me stranded, risking my life to rush her to the hospital. That was the day I accepted a marriage proposal from Luke Consta, a powerful figure from Koviak City. Luke, June, are you really willing to marry me? Since then, Luke had texted me every few minutes, seeking confirmation. Once I replied, he flooded my phone with images of diamond rings. Luke, these are rings I acquired from auctions. Let me know if one catches your eye. When I didn't respond right away, he messaged again just seconds later. Luke, if none of these appeal to you, there's another jewelry auction in the Palm Federation next week. I can take you there to pick one out. After a close look, I sent him a voice message. The Graff pink diamond is beautiful. Let's make it our wedding ring. Unbeknownst to me, Stephen had walked in and overheard. His usually composed face showed a rare flicker of panic. Wedding ring? What wedding ring? He questioned. I met his gaze with calm indifference, ready with an excuse. Just then, my phone rang. It was my so-called best friend, Emily Bradera. I answered, and her trembling voice came through. June, is Stephen with you? I just started bleeding again. I'm so scared. I hadn't even managed a response before Stephen snatched the phone from my hand, urgently comforting her. Emily, don't be afraid. I'm on my way. Without another word to me, he dashed out, forgetting his promise to celebrate our 10-year anniversary with a night out along Perla River. Watching him rush off to another woman, I felt no more sadness, no more pain, just a quiet, numb acceptance. My phone rang again. This time, it was Luke. June, are you ready? I'll come to Stratton City to pick you up tomorrow, Luke informed me. Gazing off into the distance, I replied softly, give me one more week. I'll settle my business here and return to Koviak for our wedding. His voice was gentle. All right. I'll be waiting. And remember, if you run into anything you can't handle, just call me. After ending the call, I dialed Stephen's grandfather, Drew, to say goodbye. Drew and my grandfather had been comrades in arms, their bond forged in hardship. When I was 8 and diagnosed with a severe heart condition, my grandfather had decided I should recuperate with the Redmond family in Stratton City, where their private hospital specialized in cardiology. For years, Stephen's family treated me as one of their own. Drew especially showered me with care. Now that I was returning to Koviak, a farewell was only right. Stephen didn't come home that night. Emily, however, sent me a message. Emily, you're so cute, getting cake all over your face. The image she attached showed Stephen bent over a slice of cake, her finger smearing frosting across his face. Moments later, she retracted the message. Emily, sorry, June, I sent that to you by mistake. Emily, Stephen thought it was a cute picture and wanted me to send it to him. You're not mad, are you? I didn't reply. Instead, I went to my room and began packing. By noon the next day, Stephen finally returned home with a gift, hoping to make amends. June, Emily's condition was critical last night. I only stayed to take her to the hospital, he said. I opened the box he handed me without a word. Inside was a Van Cleef & Arpels watch, its band lined with diamonds. Luxurious, yet I remembered he'd given Emily a similar gift before, only mine cost a little more. Seeing my lack of response, he asked, worried, June, are you mad at me? Calmly, I answered, no. Emily is sick. You did what you should. His gaze shifted uncertainly, sensing something unusual in my response, but in the end, he only sighed. I'm glad you're not angry. After all, we have a long future to share together, but Emily. He paused, his eyes turning red. I cut him off with tired indifference. Then spend more time with her. With that, I turned to leave, but he caught my wrist. I looked back, emotionless. What is it? Frustration flickered in his eyes, though he didn't seem to understand the source. A notification sound interrupted him, and he checked his phone. Looking up, he said, June, I'll be traveling for a few days. I won't be back right away. Take care of yourself while I'm gone. I replied with a simple relieved he wouldn't be around. It gave me the perfect chance to visit the Redmond family and say goodbye. Early the next morning, I took the farewell gifts I had prepared and headed to the Redmond residence. When I announced I would be moving back to Koviak, tears welled up in Stephen's mother's eyes. June, what's happened? You were happy here. Why the sudden decision to go back? Asked Pamela Norton, Stephen's mother. Meanwhile, Stephen's father, Antonio, slammed a hand on the table. And where's Stephen? Why isn't he with you? Did he do something to hurt you? I hesitated, then decided against the truth. No, it's nothing like that. I just haven't been home in so long. I want to go back and visit. Pamela looked at me, concerned. Does Stephen know about this? To avoid further trouble, I nodded slightly. Yes, he knows. Hearing my response, no one pressed further. After a brief exchange of farewells, I rose to leave. Just then, the doors of the Redmond residence opened, and I came face to face with Stephen. Emily stood beside him, offered me a warm smile, and spoke gently. June, what brings you here? The way she asked, it was as if she had already assumed the role of the Redmond family's future daughter-in-law. Where I go isn't something I need to explain to you. With that, I brushed past Stephen and headed for the door. Stephen quickly recovered and hurried after me to offer an explanation. June, please don't misunderstand. I brought Emily home today so my parents could help her find a suitable doctor. And besides, she's your best friend. You wouldn't hold it against me, would you? For a brief moment, memories of Stephen's promise when he was 18, under the cherry blossom tree, drifted into my mind. He had said that marrying me was his life's dream and that one day he would proudly bring me to meet his parents as their future daughter-in-law. But now, he was here with another woman and had lied to me about going on a business trip. I looked into his hopeful eyes and said slowly, of course not. I've never been one to hold grudges. People who weren't worth it weren't worth my concern. Stephen looked taken aback by my words. June, do you really not care at all? He truly was impossible to please. In the past, whenever he spent time with Emily, I would be upset, and he'd call me petty. Now that I no longer questioned anything between them, he still wasn't satisfied. However, I had no desire to explain myself, nor did I see any need to. Finally, he leaned down to plant a light kiss on my forehead. Be a good girl and wait for me at home. Once inside the elevator, I wiped my forehead clean, feeling a wave of revulsion. On our 10th anniversary, Stephen had also used a business trip as an excuse to brush me off. That night, Emily unexpectedly called me through video chat. When I picked up, the lively sounds of a wedding reception filtered through. Only then did I realize the celebration belonged to Stephen and Emily. 3 months earlier, Emily had discovered she had a terminal illness. She had posted online, I hope I can hold a wedding with the person I love most before I die. At the time, I hadn't sensed anything amiss between them and even commented, asking her who this loved one was. Emily had replied with, when the time comes, you'll know. Learning the truth was like a blade slicing through my heart, leaving me breathless. Desperately, I repeatedly called Stephen, demanding to know why he had done this to me. But he didn't answer a single call. While I cried myself unconscious at home, he spent that night with Emily, celebrating their wedding night. Thankfully, it would soon all be over. Upon returning home, I received a call from Emily. June, I'm truly sorry. I really didn't expect to run into you today, she claimed. I scoffed and remained silent. She took a deep breath and continued in a tone tinged with envy. Mrs. Redmond is such a kind woman. She was so gentle, asking after my health and comfort. They even said they'd do their best to find a good doctor to help me. She paused before lowering her voice, as if conspiratorially. June, tell me, why couldn't it be me who marries into the Redmond family? Sure, it could be her, if she had what it took. Well, then, I'll wish you two all the happiness in advance. I ended the call, considering blocking her to keep her from parading herself in front of me again. But as I turned to do so, my finger accidentally opened her social media page. I was startled to see she had stolen my design sketches and entered them into a competition. My hands shook with anger. Those sketches had been my birthday gift to Stephen. Yet, he had secretly given them to Emily. Clutching my pounding heart, I forced myself to stay calm. I pulled out my copyright certificate and filed a report with the competition's website, accusing Emily's submission of plagiarism. After that, Nora Spiegel, my friend and business partner at the studio, called me. June, what's going on? Why do you suddenly want to pull out of our business? Nora was a mutual friend between Emily and me, but she had never gotten along with Emily. So I told her everything, including my upcoming wedding. Outraged, she cried out, Emily is fucking despicable. Just because she's sick, she thinks she can snatch someone else's man? Who knows if she's even telling the truth about being ill? She fumed. I can't stand it, I'm calling her to tell her off. Her loyalty touched me. Forget it, not worth it. Besides, the wedding is happening soon. Just then, footsteps sounded behind me, and Stephen's voice cut through the air, startling me. A wedding? What wedding? He questioned. I ended the call and turned to look at Stephen, noticing a hint of tension on his face. A sudden impulse stirred within me. I just heard some juicy gossip, I began. There's a guy out there who hid from his girlfriend that he went off and married another woman. A smirk tugged at my lips as I added. My friend said that guy's got nerves of steel, playing his poor girlfriend, who thinks she's his one and only. Unexpectedly, Stephen reacted intensely, shouting, "What kind of nonsense is that? Maybe those people don't know the whole story. Who's to say he didn't have a reason? What if the wedding was fake, just to fulfill some dying person's last wish?" His righteous defense made me chuckle. 10 years of feelings. All thrown away, like scraps for a stray. Perhaps sensing my change in mood, Stephen stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. June, what's been going on with you lately? We've been through so much together. Can't you feel how much I love you? He whispered while holding me tightly. Once we sort out Emily's situation, let's get married, okay? He murmured, his hand slowly slipping under my shirt. I tilted my head away and pressed his restless hand down. Sorry, I'm really not in the mood. Stephen's deep gaze lingered on me for a long moment, but he couldn't read anything in my expression. Finally, he withdrew, disappointed, and muttered, I'll sleep in the study. Later that night, I hadn't been asleep for long when I heard him hurriedly leaving the house. I turned over and went back to sleep. But the next morning, as soon as I opened my bedroom door, I saw Stephen waiting in the living room. I raised an eyebrow. Up so early? He didn't respond with his usual warmth. Instead, he launched into an accusation. Why did you report Emily for plagiarism? Do you know how much that hurts her? My smile froze. Tell me, was that design draft Emily's own work? Did she not plagiarize? Stephen's eyes widened in shock. June, what happened to you? Where did the kind, compassionate you go? You have everything, the awards, the recognition. Why can't you just let her have this one thing? Emily is so upset that her condition has worsened, and she's barely hanging on in the hospital. All she wanted was to experience the joy of winning a prize at least once before the end. Is that so wrong? My fingers trembled with anger. I shot back, of course it's wrong. Stephen, you know how much I've sacrificed for my dreams over the years. Do you have any idea what I went through to perfect my art? My hands were raw and bleeding from the cold, aching and itching. And now, you just brush it off, asking me to hand my work over to Emily? If she wants to feel the joy of winning, she should work for it herself, not take what's mine. I could live without a man, but my work? Anyone who tried to touch that would pay. Stephen didn't notice my trembling. He only threw out a bitter line, "You've changed," and stormed out. As my heart seized in pain, I collapsed to the floor, clutching at my chest, gasping, "Stephen, help me." But he never looked back, not even once. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed. Luke was there, wrapping his arms around me with a worried look. "June, let's go back to Koviak." This time, I closed my eyes slowly and whispered, "Okay." I hadn't realized until now that a single moment could burn away every last hope. On the third day after I left, Stephen finally noticed my disappearance. He called me endlessly, but I blocked his number. If he cared so much about Emily, then why keep stringing me along? I curled up on a luxurious sofa, staring at the rows of custom wedding dresses that Luke had arranged to be delivered, each one more breathtaking than the last. With a gentle smile, he draped his arm around my shoulder. "Which one do you like?" I took my time choosing, eventually settling on a strapless mermaid gown made of delicate tulle. "This one. I think it's beautiful." He chuckled and patted my head affectionately. "Then this is the one." After we chose the dress, he left to finalize the details of our wedding with the planners. In the meantime, Nora told me that Stephen went nearly mad after realizing I was gone. He searched everywhere, only to learn from his parents that I had returned to Koviak. "June, what do you think he'll do when he finds out about the wedding?" Nora asked. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Thinking it was the wedding planner, I went to open the door, only to come face to face with Stephen, his eyes bloodshot. At the sight of me, his expression was a mix of disbelief and desperation. "June, you're really here? Why did you leave without a word? You're just doing this to make me angry, aren't you?" His voice was thick with emotion. "Come back with me. We'll get married right away." As he tried to pull me back, Luke appeared and blocked him. "Redmond, stay away from my fiancé." Stephen staggered, his voice shaking. "What did you just say?" Luke stood tall, his presence like a wall between me and Stephen's searing gaze. But Stephen refused to believe it. "June, stop this nonsense. After 10 years together, you can't just throw it all away. Were all our promises meaningless?" I didn't want to drag this out, so I handed him my marriage license with Luke. "Stephen, I'm not lying. We are engaged and will marry soon." Stunned, his shoulders slumped as he whispered, "WI?" As Stephen prepared to rush forward, Luke stepped in front of him, blocking his path. With a stern expression, he chastised, "How dare you ask why about June? Don't you have any idea what you've done these past few days?" With that, Luke produced a stack of photos from seemingly nowhere and flung them to the ground. "You claim to love June, yet you've deceived her by marrying another woman? Is this what you call love?" The images depicted Emily smiling blissfully, while Stephen stood beside her, looking every bit the gallant knight guarding his princess. The warmth and harmony of the scene felt like a dagger to my heart. In a panic, Stephen stammered, "June, it's not what you think. My marriage to Emily is a sham, just a game we played. I was merely fulfilling a wish she had before she passed." A single tear slipped from the corner of my eye. Luke quickly reached out, gently wiping it away. I stepped forward, fixing Stephen with a steady gaze. "If your wedding to her is fake, then what about all the affection you showed her? Is that fake too?" Stephen wearily shut his eyes. "Emily is your good friend. I thought you wouldn't mind that I was just acting. I didn't mean to hurt you." His words dripped with irony. "Stephen, do you honestly believe what you just said? On that day, when you rushed out without hesitation, did you ever consider that I might be so angry I could have had a heart attack and died in our home?" Stephen's body jolted, and he suddenly looked up at me, bewildered. "June, what did you say?" I felt exhausted and didn't want to engage with him any longer. "Stephen, it's over between us." His face darkened, a storm brewing in his expression. For a fleeting moment, I saw a mix of guilt and resentment in his eyes. But just as quickly, he let out a bitter laugh and said slowly, "It doesn't matter. Even if you get married, it doesn't matter. I will drag you to the courthouse to divorce him even if I have to force you." With that, he pulled a blank check from his pocket and tossed it onto Luke's lap. Pretty boy, have you heard of the Redmonds of Stratton? Fill in the amount on that check, and then do me the courtesy of leaving my girlfriend. Otherwise, you'll regret crossing me. Stephen's blatant rudeness infuriated me, and I wanted to confront him, but Luke held me back. Without paying Stephen any mind, Luke merely smiled slightly. Redmond, is this how you plan to win back your love? That's not very impressive. The words pierced Stephen, igniting his rage as he shouted. What do you know? Do you have any idea that June and I have been inseparable since childhood? We've shared a decade of our lives together. Do you really think you have a chance of winning her back? All I have to do is take her away, and she'll be mine again. In a sudden burst of anger, Stephen swung his fist at Luke. I gasped in shock. Stephen, are you crazy? Before his fist could connect, Luke intercepted it effortlessly. Take her back? Luke's cold expression was now laced with fury. What do you think she is? Some object you can summon and dismiss at will? Despite Stephen's years of rigorous training that had left him with a body of solid muscle, he was now rendered helpless, subdued by Luke as if he were a mere child. Then, Luke chuckled coldly, and a group of bodyguards stepped forward, swiftly tying Stephen up with ropes. Stephen's anger surged, his veins bulging. Bastard! Do you know who I am? How dare you treat me like this? After adjusting his cuffs, Luke replied coolly. You're from the Redmonds of Stratton? Why don't you go back and ask your grandfather if he's ever heard of the Constas of Koviak? With that, he waved his hand, and the bodyguards carried Stephen away, ignoring the stunned look in his eyes. The Redmonds of Stratton were well established in the medical field. But the Constas of Koviak had assets spread across the country, with resources and wealth that far surpassed those of the Redmonds. Once everything was handled, Luke turned to me, a hint of anxiety in his otherwise serious gaze. June, don't misunderstand, I don't usually act this way. I gave him a small smile. I think you handled it pretty well. Given Stephen's stubborn nature, he wouldn't have backed down so easily otherwise. And I was more than ready to end his endless pursuit. That evening, Luke arranged a dinner for our families to finalize the wedding details. It was the first time I'd met his mother, Breathless, and nervous anticipation filled me as we waited. My palms began to sweat. Under the table, Luke reached over, gripped my hand tightly, and whispered, June, don't be nervous. My parents already like you a lot. When both families arrived, the atmosphere was surprisingly harmonious. When Bree saw me, she broke into a wide smile and, without hesitation, handed me a small embroidered box. June, I've heard so much about you from Luke. It's wonderful to finally meet you in person. You're even lovelier than I imagined. Her words caught me off guard. Luke and I had met at an art exhibition, he was an exhibitor, and I was the curator. Our connection was instant, and only 2 months had passed between our meeting and deciding to get married. Had he really been talking about me this often with his family? Seeing me hesitate, Luke nudged me. Go ahead, open it. It was probably a meeting gift, I figured. Maybe a watch or a handbag. But when I opened the box, my mother, sitting beside me, drew a sharp breath. Isn't this the Consta family's heirloom red diamond bracelet? Inside the box lay a red diamond bracelet, as precious as it was stunning. A business journalist once mentioned this bracelet in an interview with the Consta family, estimating its value in the 7 figures. Feeling overwhelmed, I tried to return it. This is far too valuable. But Bree picked up the bracelet and slid it onto my wrist, saying, No gift is too precious for my future daughter-in-law. She gently placed her hand over mine. Because you're worth it. That night, when I returned home with my parents, I was surprised to find Antonio and Pamela waiting for us. My mother sighed. Back then, your grandfather was adamant about sending you to Stratton. And the Redmonds promised they would take good care of you. We all thought you and Stephen would end up together. We don't know what happened between you two. But you've been under their family's care all these years, so it wouldn't be right to turn them away. I nodded, seeing her point. Mom, don't worry. I'll handle it. Carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa, I went to the study. The moment Pamela saw me, her eyes reddened. June, is it true that you returned to Koviak to get married? I took a deep breath. Mr. and Mrs. Redmond, I won't hide it from you. Stephen and I, it's over. Antonio's face darkened, anger flashing in his eyes. Did that idiot do something to hurt you? I swear I'll teach him a lesson. I stayed silent, but Pamela caught on quickly. It's because of Emily, isn't it? I didn't answer, but my expression said it all. Pamela looked utterly ashamed. June, we've always seen you as our own daughter. Our son has wronged you so deeply, I can't even face you right now. Though I'd lived away from home all these years, Pamela had treated me with genuine kindness. I wouldn't let her actions with Stephen affect my respect for her. Mrs. Redmond, regardless of what happened, you've always been like family to me, I said. I could guess they'd come here hoping I'd reconsider. But once they understood the truth, they left without pressing me. After they were gone, Nora sent me a string of urgent messages. Nora, June, check out these screenshots I sent you. Nora, Emily has really lost it. Nora, she found out you're getting married. And now she's spreading horrible rumors about you online. She's unbelievable. I opened one of the screenshots and felt the sting of malicious gossip. Emily, some people play innocent like a pure little flower. But before even breaking up with their boyfriend, they're already rushing to marry someone else. How cheap can you get? Alongside the text was a side profile photo of me from the past. And in the comments, Emily had written even worse things. Emily, you wouldn't believe it, her fiancé is old and ugly, but she's only after his money. Nora called me. I couldn't stand it, so I argued with her and blocked her. Immersed in the happiness of my upcoming wedding, I didn't want anyone to spoil my mood. Thus, I reassured Nora, don't waste your energy on her. Only 3 days until the wedding, I can't wait to see you as my maid of honor in Koviak. In the days leading up to the wedding, Luke and I spent time exploring the city. Strolling through parks and shops, deepening our connection, as he put it. I tried to distance myself from the past. But gossip about Emily somehow found its way to me through mutual friends. The day the Redmond couple returned to Stratton, they immediately went to the hospital to check Emily's medical records. What they discovered was shocking, her test results were suspicious, showing signs of tampering. Following this lead, they eventually confirmed that Emily was perfectly healthy. Her supposed fainting spells and cancer signs had been nothing but an act to manipulate Stephen's attention. Upon learning that, Pamela had the hospital security escort Emily out, belongings and all. Emily, panicked and in tears, clung to the hospital doorframe. Mrs. Redmond, please don't kick me out. Don't make me leave. If Stephen finds out, he'll fight you on this. Furious, Pamela slapped her hard. You dare bring up Stephen? Get out right now. You're a waste of hospital resources. Thrown out of the hospital, Emily huddled by the entrance, sobbing as she called Stephen. 5 minutes later, Stephen arrived, looking grim. At first, Emily thought he was there to defend her, but he grabbed her by the hair and yanked her back. What did you just say? So you've been lying about being sick this whole time? Emily barely dared to cry, her lips trembling as she pleaded, Stephen, I did it all because I love you. And you liked me too, didn't you? You always said June was too perfect, that you felt pressured around her. But with me, it's different. You can be more relaxed, happier. Before she could finish, he threw her to the ground. Who do you think you are? Do you really think you can compare to June? 10 of you wouldn't measure up to her little finger, he barked. Emily's face fell, and a bitter smile spread across her lips as she stared at him. Stephen, why won't you admit it? You already love me. If you didn't, then why all the attention, all the times you defended and took care of me? Stephen's gaze turned cold as he delivered the truth mercilessly. I did it because June told me you were her friend. I was helping you for her peace of mind. If it weren't for that connection to her, do you think I'd even look at you twice? Upon hearing this, Emily shook her head in disbelief. In the bustling street, she shouted out in a frenzy. After venting, she spoke to Stephen in an almost boastful tone. And now, after everything, what good does it do to say you loved her? The day you married me, I video called June and streamed the entire ceremony just for her to see. She paused, savoring the impact of her words. Guess what? How many times do you think she called you that day? How do you think she felt hearing the sounds from our wedding night? Losing Stephen made her lose herself to madness. Stephen pulled Emily into the car, pushed the speedometer to its limits, and aimed straight for the riverbank. "Without June, let's just die together," he yelled, his voice edged with desperation. The car careened down the road, and Emily screamed in terror. When Stephen's sports car was finally pulled over by the traffic police, Emily fainted from sheer fright, her body limp with shock. 3 days later, the day before my wedding, I received a call from Stephen. His voice, hoarse and barely recognizable, felt surreal, like something from a distant past as he said my name. "June." His voice crackled over the line. "On your wedding day, could I come? If you can't be mine, I want to see you marry, to see it with my own eyes." Before I could respond, someone reached over and took the phone from me. Luke, who had quietly appeared at my side, answered in my place. "Of course, you're welcome," he said smoothly. "In fact, I'll make sure to offer you a drink myself." On the other end, Stephen's voice sharpened with frustration. "Give the phone back to June. I'm speaking to her, not you." Luke raised an eyebrow, entirely unbothered. "We'll soon be a married couple. What I say," she says, "it's the same." Infuriated, Stephen ended the call. Then, Luke handed the phone back to me, his stern expression softening as he looked down at me. "June," he said, "you won't be mad at me, right?" I couldn't help but smile. "Of course not. You handled it well, it saved me a lot of trouble." Relieved, he let out a sigh. "Good, I was worried you'd be upset." But in truth, I was still a little concerned. I knew Stephen too well. He wasn't one to give up easily. "Luke, are we really going to let Stephen attend our wedding?" "I'm worried he'll cause trouble," I said. "Don't worry, June," he replied, unconcerned. "With me there, he won't be able to cause a scene." Luke had never been one to be easily pushed around. I had seen him handle business with sharp precision, yet he was always gentle and attentive to me. I stepped forward, embracing him lightly. His body tensed slightly. "Thank you, Luke," I murmured. Those words carried so much. "Thank you for your patience and standing by me. Thank you for giving me a sense of dignity when my heart lay shattered in pieces." With a gentle hand, he placed his palm on my head. "Between us, there's no need for thanks." On the day of the wedding, the guests filled every seat. I sat in the hotel's dressing room, nerves buzzing. Luke stopped by several times, bringing beverages and snacks to keep my energy up, much to my friend's envy. Nora teased, "Looks like the groom is trying to fatten up our bride before the ceremony." But Luke only looked at me tenderly. "Today will be a long day, make sure you eat." The venue glowed with vibrant flames of orchids, arranged everywhere to catch the light. In a custom wedding gown, I entered to the sound of soft music. A quiet cheer rising from the crowd as my teary-eyed parents walked me down the aisle. The walk from the doorway to the center of the hall lasted only a minute. But it had taken me 10 years to leave behind a mistaken love and come to the person I was meant to be with. 10 years that felt like another lifetime. With deep emotion, Luke walked toward me and dropped to one knee. "June, will you marry me?" he asked. The enormous diamond ring he held sparkled before my eyes, and I felt a surge of emotion. I covered my mouth and nodded. We exchanged rings and sealed our vows with a kiss. To announce the celebration, Luke had rented an ad screen in the busiest district of Koviak, where a video of our wedding played on loop. He wanted everyone to see my happiness and to send their blessings. Unexpectedly, Stephen, who had insisted on coming to the wedding, was nowhere to be seen. Only after the guests had gone did I notice him in a far corner, held between two bodyguards. His hands and feet bound, with a cloth stuffed in his mouth to keep him quiet. Luke approached and removed the cloth. Stephen's face was flushed with rage. "Is this how you treat your guests?" Without missing a beat, Luke replied, polite yet unyielding. "Apologies if the hospitality wasn't up to standard." Stephen glared at me with an expression of helplessness, nearly pleading. "June." But I merely nodded slightly, my voice cold. "Thank you, Mr. Redmond, for honoring us with your presence. And please, do send us an invitation when you remarry." My husband and I will certainly attend together. At the words my husband and I, Luke's eyebrow lifted, a subtle smile playing on his lips. At last, Stephen slumped in defeat, looking at Luke. You did this on purpose, he muttered bitterly. You wanted me to watch June marry you. You wanted to kill any last hope I had left. You're a real schemer. Unfazed, Luke smiled unabashedly. Thank you for the compliment. Utterly defeated by such unflappable resolve, Stephen fell silent and collapsed to the floor. June, you don't understand, he said, his voice broken. I prepared so much, I was ready to win you back at this wedding. But when I saw you walking to him with that shy smile, it felt like I swallowed 1,000 shards of glass, tearing me apart from the inside. Hearing this, I looked at him without much expression. Oh, that's normal. I felt the same way on the day you married Emily. The light in Stephen's eyes faded completely. Luke's strategy had worked. I knew, finally, that Stephen and I were finished, completely, irreversibly finished. On our wedding night, I sat nervously on the bed. The sound of running water filtered in from the bathroom, gradually reaching my ears. Before long, Luke emerged, enveloped in a mist of damp warmth. And, revealing his sculpted waist and abdomen, I instinctively swallowed hard. He stepped closer, leaning down to whisper in my ear. Do you like it? That night, I experienced the pinnacle of pleasure. When I awoke the next morning, my body ached all over, and my throat was hoarse from shouting. But I had to quickly pull myself together. Tonight, I would accompany Luke to a party hosted by his friends. I chose a champagne-colored strapless dress. As I appeared alongside Luke, his arm around mine, it sparked quite a commotion among the guests. After settling me in, he excused himself to greet his friends. Among them was the dashing Andrew Quill, known for his family's antique business. The moment he spotted me, he approached with a playful grin. So, you're the Miss June Williams who's been on Luke's mind day and night. I smiled back. Andrew, I've heard so much about you. Andrew raised his glass, chuckling as he spoke. You wouldn't believe it. Ever since he caught a glimpse of you as a child, he's mentioned you time and again in front of us. He continued, when you became an artist. He poured a fortune into supporting your exhibitions and bought up all your paintings. Talk about dedication. At that moment, others nearby chimed in. And that's not all. Luke even opened a branch office in Stratton just for you. Their words shed light on my earlier confusion. So that's why, after I had had a heart attack at home, Luke had been the first to arrive and rush me to the hospital. Our connection had started long ago, even in childhood. When Luke returned, he caught my gaze. What were you thinking about so deeply? He asked, tilting his head slightly. I turned to him with a smile. I was just wondering how we met when we were younger. I can't remember anything at all. He wrapped an arm around my waist, a hint of mystery in his voice. Many years ago, there was a little girl who would cry alone under the cherry blossom tree. I was practicing piano upstairs and was so disturbed by the noise that I decided to see who could cry for so long. That's when I spotted you. His words triggered a memory. You were the boy who comforted me. Due to my health issues, I often felt isolated from friends and would retreat to that cherry blossom tree to cry. Little did I know, I had met such a kind-hearted boy there. He would listen to my troubles while I would bring him delicious treats and flowers. We had shared some truly beautiful moments. My goodness, after all these years, the little boy had grown into such a striking man. Noticing my astonished expression, he playfully ruffled my hair. I watched you adapt to life in Stratton. And I was happy to see you find joy, even as you grew close to Stephen. I was miserable at that time, yet I thought, as long as you were happy, that was all that mattered. But later, I realized you weren't truly happy with him. I wanted you to smile, so I quietly supported your career, smoothing out any obstacles in your way. As he spoke, a bitter smile crossed his lips. But desires only grow, and when I saw how Stephen failed to appreciate you, I couldn't help but want to keep you by my side and love you as you deserve. My heart trembled slightly at his words. After Stephen returned to Stratton, he fell into a deep depression, neglecting even his business affairs. In a fit of anger, Drew struck him with his cane, and Stephen ended up in the hospital. Emily had gone missing for a while, with no one knowing her whereabouts. Nora mentioned that someone had spotted her scavenging for scrap in the southern part of the city. Completely disheveled and out of her mind. One night, Nora called me, her voice urgent. "June, you won't believe this. I ran into Emily a few days ago." When I heard her name again, I felt a little stir within me. She had become someone far removed from my life. "Tisk, she's in such a terrible state," Nora said. "Emily doesn't even recognize people anymore, rambling about wanting to marry a rich heir and live the high life. Some homeless men on the street noticed her looks and tried to take advantage. After a few encounters, she's become even more unhinged, and now she's over 3 months pregnant." I felt no sympathy for her situation. We were all adults, the paths we chose were our own. Once, I had exhausted myself trying to help her, only to be met with betrayal. After I ended the call, Luke brought me some late-night snacks. "Honey, don't tire yourself out. Come have some tiramisu and take a break." Looking up at his handsome face filled me with contentment. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. Inside, my beloved was by my side.